Well, hello once again. This is Clarke, and I am continuing on with Psalm 23. Um, I'm doing this recording. It's not live because I've got three more verses to do. Verse 4, verse 5, verse 6, and then I've got to be leaving to go out of town. So I'm trying to get this done before all that happens. And here in crazy Colorado, we had 4 inches of snow last night. And here's the thing, we had 4 inches of snow up here on the north side. Down in the city, they got rain. They got nothing. But I'm looking out at snowdrifts blowing in my yard, wind, and at least 4 inches that I could measure in several places. So it's just spring in Colorado. That's the way it is. So we're going to get on with today in this session, verse 4 of Psalm 23, and then I'll do 5 and 6 in separate entries, and I'm not sure when I post them, but they'll be close behind, pretty close behind everything else. So, verse 4 says, "Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me, thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me." So here in this verse, we start a departure from the other parts. The first time the psalmist takes action. Before, it was all about God taking care, God watching over, God providing, God supplying, God doing everything that he could on his part, which, that's the great way that it starts. And this is the first time that in verse 4 now that the psalmist finally says, I'm going to do something. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. At this point, there's a change. The individual starts walking. It is such a typical pattern, really, of the way that you see a number of things, not only in the book of Psalms, but throughout the scriptures, where God does everything to take care of his end first. He nurtures, he cares, he protects, he provides, he supplies, and then finally, at the end, we're able to just say, okay, I'm ready. I'm ready to move out. I'm ready to go ahead. I'm ready to take part. It really is pretty fantastic when you think about it and you see the number. And again, like I said, it's in a number of places in the Word. In 1 John 4, 9 through 11, it says, In this was manifested the love of God toward us, because that God sent his only begotten Son into the world, that we might live through him. Herein is love, not that we loved God, but that he loved us and sent his Son to be the propitiation or payment for our sins. Beloved, if God so loved us, we ought also to love one another. So here again, God is the one who takes the first action and takes the first step. God is the one who cares first, loves first, moves first, and then enables us to then move ahead on our own. Psalm 37, verse 1 through 5. Fear not thyself because of evildoers, neither be thou envious against the workers of iniquity. For they shall soon be cut down like the grass and wither as the green herb. Trust in the Lord and do good, so shalt thou dwell in the land, and thou shalt be fed. Delight thyself in the Lord, and he shall give thee the desires of thine heart. Commit thy way unto the Lord, trust also in him, that he will bring it to pass. It is a beautiful partnership that God is portraying. And the amazing thing about this section is that the world today and people today, what the standard usually is you commit to me first. You do something for me first. And then if you prove yourself, then I'll do something for you. But it's just the opposite with God in a number of these situations where it's directly portrayed as to what he will do, how he will care, how he will equip us and enable us to do what we need to do. Time and time again, this pattern is set up where God just says, prove me. Let me show you who I am. Let me show you what I can do so that you can go do your best and that you can trust me and move out on the promises that I've given. Again, it's just the opposite in what we see in the events and the way that the world considers we should be doing things and how things should be done. God has always done more than we could ever do for him. He takes care of us uh, and provides for us so that we are enabled to move ahead. I will bring you peace. I will bring you comfort. I will take care of your wants and needs. I will take you down the path of righteousness. I will protect you. I will watch over you. I will heal your physical body. These are all the things that he said so far in this 23rd Psalm, things that he's provided for us. And now you finally get to the point where the individual is saying, the psalmist is saying, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. So this is the concept of this verse and the deeper meaning or the deeper side to this verse, and it's important for us to recognize it. Here it says that God is providing for us, and I think if you were on the thing that I did before on Psalm 91, it talked about hiding under the wings of God, God giving us protection and shelter, being in his mighty fortress, being hidden away with God. All of these concepts are also used in the psalm, but I think sometimes we get the wrong idea or the wrong perspective of that. Sometimes people want to hide under the wings of God or in the mighty fortress of God or be protected by God to run away from things. And that's not what life is all about. Life isn't about running away from things. Life is fully participating in things. We can go to God for comfort. We can go to God for protection. We can go to God for provision in our life. And we can escape things that are threatening at the moment. But it's up to us to get back into the situations of life, get back into living, to get back into moving without fear, get back into connecting with people, connecting with communities around us, and being who we can be and providing what we can according to what God has already given us. Staying hidden away in that personal fellowship with God is maybe great and wonderful in the beginning, and maybe sweet and comforting to us. But how does anybody else ever find out about God? You know, we are the ones who go and represent the voice. People can't see what he does except what they see and what he does in our lives. We take the comfort that we are given and then we share that comfort with others. But if you stay hidden in those places, yeah, it's secure, it's sweet, it's wonderful, it's tender, all those other things. But if that's where we stay all the time, like being stuck in our house during this quarantine time, if that's where we stay all the time forever, how's anything ever going to get out? People do feel like they want to withdraw from the world to protect themselves. They do want to, be in an environment that's friendly and helpful and wonderful. But again, that's not the way that life is meant to be lived. Connecting, communicating, involving, and doing those things all are part of the true extension of life. So, we can't we can't be so concerned about hiding in the wings of God or hiding in the fortress of God that we're not able to fully live life in all its glory and all that it was meant to be. In John 17, there's an interesting section where Jesus is talking sort of his last comments, some of the last statements that he made before the crucifixion. And he said, here's what it says in John 17. These words spake Jesus and lifted up his eyes to heaven and said, Father, the hour is come. Glorify thy Son, that thy Son may glorify thee. I have manifested thy name unto the men which thou gavest me in the out of the world. Thine they were, and thou gavest them me. King James is awkward sometimes. And they have kept thy word. Pray for them. I pray not for the world, but for them which thou hast given me, for they are thine. All mine are thine, and thine are mine, and I am glorified in them. And now I am no more in the world, Now, again, this is maybe where people get the concept, the religious concept of, I don't want to have anything to do with the world. And that's always been kind of disturbing to me, because God created the world in Genesis and said that it was very good. And everybody else lives in the world, and we live in the world. So how can you not be in and among those things if that's the creation that we live in? But he goes on to say, these are in the world. I come unto thee, Holy Father, keep thine own name, keep through thine own name those that thou hast given me, that they may be one as we are one. While I was with them in the world, I kept them in thy name. Those that thou gavest me I have kept, and none of them is lost but the son of perdition, and that the scripture might be fulfilled. Now I come to thee. These things I speak in the world, that they may have their joy, that they might have my joy fulfilled in themselves. I have given them thy word, and the world hated them, because they are not of the world, even as I am not of the world. Okay, now again, you have to understand the bigger picture of what he's saying here. Just then, I don't want to be a part of anything. I don't want to, I'm going to be separate, because he goes on to say, I pray not for that thou shouldest take them out of the world, okay, but that thou shouldest keep them from evil. And again, that ties in directly with this verse in Psalm 23. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. Yeah, there are things in the world that are not great. There are things in the world that aren't the best. But that doesn't mean we have to leave the world to avoid them or be protected by them. He goes on to say, sanctify them through thy truth. Thy word is truth. As thou hast sent me into the world, even so have I also sent them into the world. Okay? So we will walk through the valley of the shadow of death, and I'll explain a little bit more about that in a minute here. But we will be participants in life and be in all kinds of places in life. We don't have to hide away and huddle away and be tucked away to be safe or to enjoy life as it's supposed to be lived. We can continue to be ourselves and to take all that God has given us in those first three verses of Psalm 23, and more to come, I'll guarantee, in the last three, and live triumphantly in the realm that we live in. We are an example by living what God has given us. We're not out there, we're not, our main purpose here isn't to recruit or to gather things, gather groups under banners of denominations or different groups, one against another. Our job is to live what has been given us, to manifest what has been shared with us, that God has provided for us, to live the life that God has given us. What better witness could there be? What better attraction could there be if somebody sees your life and likes your life and wants to be connected to your life? That's the best of all worlds. So now, just a minute, I'll use one comment here, because somebody said, and this was kind of crazy on the broadcasts that have been around, about people are not supposed to touch their face because of all this virus stuff. So if I lick my finger to turn the pages, people shouldn't get upset, because I'm in my house by myself. I've sanitized my own hands. I've done all the little things that I'm supposed to do or whatever. But it was, it's kind of crazy when the whole world is focused on whether I touch my cheek or whether I touch my tongue to my finger. And we just got to rise up a little bit above the insanity and the scariness of the world, and just, be smart, do the things you're supposed to do, wash your hands and do all that. But that just kind of crossed my mind as I was turning the page. Anyway, so these three previous verses in Psalm 23 have said All our needs and all our wants are taken care of by our Heavenly Father. Abundance is given to us. Peace is given to us. Health is given to us. The righteousness of His name is given to us. The protection of His name is given to us. All of these things have been given to us so that we can now go do something with them, so that we don't have to be afraid about walking out in life. We don't have to be afraid of things that are around us. At this present time, God has taken care of us and given us so much that now we can walk out and manifest that life and show others that life. We can walk through the valley of the shadow of death because God is with us. I believe really that term shadow or valley represents the world that we go into every day. And the phrase shadow of death is the key thing to look at and the key thing to focus on in this concept. Hebrews 2:14 says that the devil is the one who has the power of death. The shadow of death represents the threat of what might be, not the consequences that are coming, but the threat of what might be coming. And that, it doesn't say, yea, though I walk through the valley of death. That's not what it says. It says, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, the threat of death. If I see the shadow of a big dog, it might represent a big dog, at least to my mind. And that may mean that the dog could attack me. The dog could bite me. But can the shadow bite? No, the shadow can't bite. The shadow is only representation. It's not the real thing. Maybe that thing is there. Maybe it isn't. I don't know. It's just a shadow. All I can see is the shadow. It could be a fixed image. It could be a statue. In some places you'll drive in at night, you'll drive through people's neighborhoods or whatever, and mostly out in the country. And there'll be a deer, a form of a deer, and it's just a carved whatever of a deer. And at first you look at it and you can only see the kind of the shadow of it, and you think, oh, there's a deer. And then you realize it's just somebody put up an image that looks like a deer. It's an image of it, but it's not the real thing. So the shadow of death, that's a very important phrase to think about. It's one thing I do know is that a shadow is a threat and only a threat. The shadow itself cannot hurt me. In fact, if that big dog is real, but it's behind a fence and it can't get out, then why am I afraid? Why am I afraid of a shadow? Why am I afraid of something that is not able to reach me? Again, the shadow is just a threat to intimidate me. And that's the thing that we've got to focus on, especially because why would he write it that way? Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. That's the thing that is important for me to focus on. That it is that shadow and, not necessarily the real thing. We are more than prepared by God to walk through anything and everything in life, and to walk forth into this world with confidence and boldness. We are more than prepared, more than able to walk through the valley of the shadow of death without any fear, without any intimidation. We can walk out in this world every single day knowing who we are and what we have. We can walk knowing that God has done what God has done for us, that God has prepared all of these things for us. Now, the problem is we have to have confidence in that. If you know God and you know who God is and you know God's power, like we talked about the name in the last session that we did, if you know all of that, then you can be confident in all that it represents. In Psalm 23:4, where it says, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. The words "Thou art with me" are another one of the redemptive names of Jehovah. Jehovah Shammah, Shammah, best pronunciation I can give it at this point. It means the Lord is there. What a great concept. The Lord is there. The Lord is there with me. No matter where we are, no matter what we are doing, the Lord is there with us. He is there with us. So we have nothing to be concerned about. I saw years ago, I saw this movie. It was a really cute little movie, and it was called My Bodyguard. And it was a little kid in school who kept getting bullied because he was small. And there was another kid in that same school. It might have been a year or so older than him, but he was a big guy. He had already, gone through some hormonal changes. He was a big guy and a tough guy. Well, but he was quiet. And so this little kid made friends with him. And the big guy really liked the little guy, and he said, "Oh, okay, this is cool." And so the little guy says, "Look, when I'm at school, I want you to be my bodyguard." So the little kid walks up one day, usually to the bullies where they're going to bully him and take advantage of him, and they start calling him names. And he says, "Hey guys," he says, "I want you to meet my bodyguard." And he reaches back, and his friend comes out behind the corner, behind the building, big buff dude, all tough and great. And all the little guys' eyes get really wide, and they run off, and they don't mess with him anymore. And that's the concept I think about, that we can walk through this world with. We walk through this world, and anything that we face, we can look that straight in the eye and say, "Hey, meet my bodyguard." And here is God and all the force of the heavens and the universe behind all of that. Meet my God. He's my bodyguard. I haven't thought about that in a long time, but it's pretty good. So no matter what we are, no matter where we are, no matter what we're doing, the Lord is there with us. He is there with us, so we have nothing to be concerned about. No matter what goes on, we can always turn to Him. We can always look to Him and say, "Hey, God, this is getting a little nerve-wracking. Can you take over, or can you handle this, or can you step in a little bit and calm the situation down? Can you be my bodyguard?" These are the things that we currently keep in mind. If the devil is in front of you and God has got your back, He's there with you. Then who do you think is going to win? I guess it depends on how much you believe in God and or what you fear in front of you. What do you think's going to have the victory? Who is there? Why is there any need to worry about any threat if we have God and the power of the universe backing us up? When my children were younger, they would get a little nervous or uncomfortable, they would get close to me. They'd start to wrap my arms around my leg or snuggle up next to me. They just wanted to be close to me and know that I was there, to protect them. Just like every child who trusts in their parents, they had that feeling that if they could get close enough to dad or close enough to mom, then everything would be safe, that everything would be protected. And that's what they did. That's how they felt, and that's how they would feel secure about the situation. And this is the same thing, that anytime we are in that situation, we are walking through the valley of the shadow of death, and we feel that there's something intimidating. God is saying, "Look, I'm right there. My rod and my staff shall comfort thee." I've got your back. I'm right there with you. I was thinking about that a minute ago. Give me 1 second. I'll do something a little crazy here. Hold on a second. Buddy, come here. Come here. Come here. Come here. This is my little papillon. This is Buddy, my little papillon. So he's a little guy, and when he gets scared, if we're traveling somewhere and he gets scared, he'll come up and lay on my shoulder or want to get in my lap or want to be somewhere close so he can be a little more confident. When we're in the house alone, he's on his own, could care less, wants to live his own life, go his own way, have his own thing, do whatever he does. But when he gets a little intimidated or a little scared, then he wants the comfort of being in somebody's arms or somebody holding him. And it's the same way, it's the same way with people. We want to feel that God is there, that God has got our back, that God is protecting us, and that's the way it is. So we get down here to that part. It goes on to say, "Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me." These are two of the tools that the shepherd used, at not only tools but also weapons to protect. But these are the ones listed for good reasons, because they were, I'm going to explain the details and the separation between them, but they were tools that they could use to defend, protect, and aid. The shepherd also had a sling, like David. David was a shepherd, and he had a sling that he could use to ward off beasts, to protect the animals. The sling is not mentioned here, but this rod and this staff are, and that's what we're going to look at. So the word rod is the word for scepter. And it's a great representation here of the shepherd, because the rod would represent the authority and the power to defend. So it was a big stick or shaft, and sometimes it would have a bigger head on the top that you could use like a club. But it represented authority as the shepherd carried it around. And this rod was a symbol of authority, and it was a symbol of protection. And the shepherds in the East weren't just, people that were hired to watch, that didn't really care about protecting the sheep. They were people who lived with the livestock and watched over the livestock, and they represented a major part of the economy of a village or a group of people. So because they could use the sheep for milk, they could use it to eat, they could use it, for clothing. So it was a big part of the economy. So they would watch over their sheep and protect them as much as they could, because it was critical to their financial success to protect these animals and to take care of them. So walking around with this symbol of the rod, it could be a defense. If somebody tried to attack the animal, it was also a symbol of power and authority. And if you remember in the Ten Commandments, Moses, who was the shepherd of all of those people, he had that big staff. Remember the staff he had? And he would use the staff to part the sea, and he would use the staff to, do a lot of things. And this was part of the normal concept of how people were protected, and again with the shepherd, how the sheep were protected. So the rod was used as a symbol of authority and something that would drive off or ward off harmful things that would attack or injure a person's life or make them less than they could be. The staff represented provision and care for the sheep. A staff. So you had the rod, which was the big defensive weapon, and then you had the staff, which was another implement that they used. And the staff would sometimes have, like a shepherd's crook or a hook, at the end, that people talk about a lot of times when you see a shepherd's crook or shepherd's staff here. And that curved piece on the end was used to pull the animals out of a mud hole or pull them out of the water if they were swept down the stream. It could also be used to pull down branches on trees, and so if they need to eat leaves or fruit in a tree, you could bring it down to them so they could get to it. I read a wonderful article one time, and I can't even find it anymore, but it was all about the shepherd of the Old Testament, and it talked about all of these things like the rod and the staff and the crooked thing that they used, and the heart that the shepherd had for taking care of these animals. And these were very commonly known to people. And so when they hear about thy rod and thy staff shall comfort me, it had a world of meaning. It had great depth of meaning to the people that heard that. Now, we, in our culture, not being around sheep herders and not being a part of that culture, we don't really understand that depth. We haven't seen that richness of the culture. But this is, trying to explain here how deep it really goes. One or two words having volumes of meaning behind it, and depth and heart to really show what God was providing. In the Old Testament, the prophet would oftentimes take a staff to symbolize that he was a shepherd of the people, and that he would watch over them and care for them. And the staff carried life-giving support or life-giving meaning to it. And there was a record, and I won't read the whole thing to you because it's rather long, but it's in 2 Kings chapter 4 if you want to look it up. And it has to do with the Shunammite woman and the prophet. So the prophet Elisha. The prophet Elisha had come through this area of territory that he had been in, and he stayed with this Shunammite woman several times, and he wanted to do something for her, and she and her husband had not had a child, and so he prayed for her and blessed her and said, God will give you a child, and he did. And then there was a time later when the child got sick. I think it was, from some records I read, it was heat stroke or something like that he, he was very sick and died. And so this Shunammite woman decided that she was going to go get Elisha to come pray for him. She believed that if she could get Elisha to come down and pray for her son, that he would raise her son from the dead, that he would be alive again. So she, and really 2 Kings chapter 4 is the chapter, and if you want to read a beautiful record of just heart and compassion, then take the time to read it, because it's a little long, but it's beautiful. So she goes to Elijah, and she tells him what's going on and what's happened, and that she wants him to come raise her son from the dead, basically. So Elisha gives his staff that represented the shepherd, for the people. He gives his staff to his servant and tells his servant to go lay this staff on the child. And people believed deeply in this, that staff had healing power. And his servant believed that if he took the staff, and Elisha believed that if he took the staff and laid it on the child, that the child would be healed. But the Shunammite woman wanted the real deal. She wanted the main man. She wanted Elisha to come. So the servant went ahead and did what he was told to by the prophet, and he laid the staff on the child. But because the mother, the Shunammite woman, believed that she needed Elisha to be there, the staff didn't work. But there are other times, other records, where the staff, that representation did take place. It did work. So Elisha goes with the woman, and he goes in, and he works. He prays for the son. He prays for the boy, and for him to be healed. And the first time he does it, nothing really happens. And so Elisha gets very serious. And it says that he walked to and fro in the room. He walked back and forth in the room, trying to figure out what to do, and how to bring, because he knew God could heal this child. He knew God wanted to heal this child. He knew he was able to heal this child. He just had to figure out, what do I need to do to make this process work? So it says, after he had been, he shut the door behind him. This is in 2 Kings 32 through 37. And when Elisha was coming to the house, behold, the child was dead, and he laid upon his bed. He went in, therefore, shut the door upon the twain, prayed unto the Lord. And he went up and lay on the child, and put his mouth on his mouth, and his eyes on his eyes, and his hands on his hands. And he stretched himself upon the child, and the flesh of the child waxed warm. Then he returned and walked in the house, but it wasn't a complete deal, it wasn't the deliverance that he wanted. So then he returned and walked to and fro in the house, and went up and stretched himself again upon the child. And the child sneezed 7 times, and the child opened his eyes and was alive. Now, this wasn't written to represent a formula of what could be done or how it works or any of that. It was just to show the details of and the compassion of Elijah to do whatever it took, whatever was necessary to make this happen. And then he called Gehazi, which was his servant, Elijah's servant. He said, call this Shunammite. So he called her, and when she came in, he said, take up thy son. And she went in and fell at his feet and bowed herself to the ground and took up her son and went out, and he was healed. So it was a great representation, again, of how deeply even the prophets believed in that staff, that thing with the hook on it. It represented the shepherd. It represented the power of God. It represented tremendous belief. Now, in this situation, the woman wanted more than that, but the prophet was willing to believe in that in the beginning, and then he went ahead and did what he needed to do in that situation to take care of them. So, in another verse, Isaiah 36:6, there's a representation of it with a little twist. It says, lo, this is God talking to Israel when they wanted to trust Egypt because Egypt had a big bad army and they thought they were protectorates of Israel. And so here's what God said to them. Lo, thou trustest in the staff of this broken reed on Egypt, whereon if a man lean, it will go into his hand and pierce it. So is Pharaoh the king of Egypt and all that trust in him. In other words, he said, you're believing that Egypt is your staff. Egypt is going to be your protector. Egypt is going to be your provider. And let me tell you, you may go lean upon that staff, but it's a man-made staff representing Egypt, and it isn't going to work. So God took the concept of the staff, which was supposed to represent one thing, and turned it around and said, if you trust Egypt as your staff, this is what's going to happen, and you're going to have a lot of problems. So it says in Psalm 23:4, thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. These words, comfort me, are the same words that we saw in verse 2 when it says he gently leads me. You see, when things are translated into English, they have a lot of different, views or slants that they can take on that. But when you go back and you see the same Hebrew word is here, and it's also here, and they mean the same thing, it really does fit beautifully when it says, thy rod and thy staff, they gently lead me. Because, that's the whole point of it, lead you in comfort and protection and provision. So the concepts are all tied together, and the words are all tied together, which really is a pretty beautiful thing. So Psalm 23 verse 4, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me, thy rod and thy staff, they gently lead me and guide me along my way and comfort me. They protect me on all sides. They bring me life-giving support and comfort whenever I need it in situations that I happen to be in. So, the first 4 verses then that we have covered so far go like this. God sets the standard as the one who watches over me by being the Lord which sees and supplies. Therefore, I shall not want for anything. He takes care of my physical needs in such abundance that it causes me to lie down in green pastures of tender grass, never wanting, never running out of his supply. He gently leads me and guides me to a quiet resting place, providing for my mental and emotional needs for peace, serenity, and comfort, because he is the God of peace. He is also the Lord which heals me. Therefore, he shall restore and return again my health. to my physical being, which is always subject to death. He leads me in the light of his counsel and his words and counsel of his words into righteous paths, because he is the Lord our righteousness. These paths are protected by his name. And today we can live in this righteousness because we have called on the name of Jesus Christ, the name that God set up above all names. Now I am ready and now I am prepared, that when I walk out into the present world, I will show forth the light of God's righteousness. I will not fear the devil's threats or his attempts to intimidate me. I will stand strong, resisting all attacks, because the Lord is there with me. He uses his rod to protect me from my enemies and to keep away the evil. He uses his staff to pull me out of troubled spots and to pull down branches to give me extra food and nourishment. His protection and provision gently guide me along my way so that I am the most blessed. So that's the first 4 verses. Pretty wonderful collection of thoughts and presentations from the heart of God just in those 4. And we've still got 5 and 6, which are just as fabulous. So I'll do those very soon here and post them as well as this. So enjoy your day and living life to the fullest and loving God. So good night.